And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Paris is set to become the global hub for artificial intelligence as it hosts the AI Action Summit, bringing together world leaders, researchers, and industry experts to shape the future of AI. With discussions focused on public service, innovation, trust, and governance, the summit aims to create a roadmap for ethical, sustainable AI. But can global cooperation keep pace with AI's rapid development? Well, joining us today on TVP World to discuss this is Aleksandra Przegalińska, Vice Rector for Innovations and AI at Koźmiński University. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
So first, can you help us understand what makes this AI Action Summit stand out from previous global AI gatherings?
Well, certainly this one has a very specific angle. It's a summit that is devoted to, let's say, AI governance and public perception of artificial intelligence, the place of AI also on the international agenda, geopolitics around it. So I would say it's somewhat comparable to the AI Safety Summit that has been organized around 2 years ago in London, also by the Prime Minister at that time. And it's the lens through which you look at artificial intelligence that makes this whole difference. Normally or usually, gatherings that are focused on artificial intelligence are, mainly composed of researchers and business. This time around, it's politics and artificial intelligence.
Okay, this is very interesting indeed, because when we are observing the newly proposed competitiveness compass, the EU does put a lot of emphasis on AI being one of the forefront of development. And like you mentioned, perception is a key word here. I believe for a very long time, when AI first sprung into our understanding and kind of existence, people have been quite fearful. Even the European approach is about how to further regulate it. But in this competitive compass and this more future, recent discussions regarding AI, I believe that the perception is more towards now we have to actually advance it in order to stay competitive. Is that a good read? Is this where we want to turn?
I think it's
the
an
perception?
excellent read. Yeah, I absolutely think your read is excellent because what we've been seeing was a major critique of Europeans' approach to artificial intelligence by European researchers and European entrepreneurs. Europe has been focused on its values, and obviously that's very important, but also on regulating AI, not so much on innovating. And the report that you mentioned, the report that covers European competitiveness, by Mario Draghi, is a big critique of that approach that says that Europe is actually left behind, that China is racing the US. These are the two powerhouses of artificial intelligence, and Europe is nowhere to be seen with its own innovation agenda. So I think the way we can read this summit is actually, an approach to change this situation where Europe again becomes this global player on the AI scene. France is quite interesting here because France is one of those rare countries that has developed its own big AI model, a big generative model called Mistral. This is an open source model that has served many businesses. You can fit it locally, then you can train it on your own data, and you can make good use of it as a medium and small-sized entrepreneur, for instance. Also for research purposes, it's a very interesting model, can be compared to those largest models like GPT that we know from the US or DeepSeek from China. It's slightly smaller, but still big enough. And it has been subsidized by the state. It has been supported financially by President Macron, which says that France has this innovative agenda on artificial intelligence, wants to lead a discussion on Europe's place in AI when it comes to geopolitics, but also competitiveness.
Right, but I think make a very good point about how Europe needs to be more competitive to stay in pace with the AI race between China and the United States. But I also think that it is quite a valid discussion to have when it comes to AI safety and regulation to have it under control. Do you think that there is a point where perhaps Europe can be the voice of reason, so to speak, when it comes to balancing the advancement of AI while making sure that some of the aspects that we're previously more worried about don't get out of hand?
Well, as you said, discussions around artificial intelligence are really sort of always or very often focused on fear, and on the fact that this is a very challenging technology in many different ways for the labor market, for our safety. And I think it's very important also to try and regulate this technology. The US approach currently is definitely not to regulate this technology, and it can have many different consequences, including very negative ones. So I would say that it is important that Europe still has a stance here and says, yes, privacy matters to us. It matters to us that you're capable of recognizing whether something is a deep fake or not. It's important to us that you know what are the limitations of this technology, and also that there are many different usages that are potentially malicious. So I think you have to strike the right balance. But the problem is we've been doing all when it comes to regulations. We have the AI Act, we have other regulations also coming up, including the one on intellectual property and generative artificial intelligence. But Europe really does not have its own agenda. There are many approaches or attempts within the European member states. Even Poland has its own 3 AI models already. As I said, France has its own model, Germany has a model. All these models are smaller than the ones offered by China and the US. So, I think there is this feeling that we should get together also among European leaders and try to figure out what is our shared agenda on AI, because if we want to be competitive in this area, we have to play as one team. It's not so that France or Germany alone can actually compete against the United States or China. It's Europe as a whole. So I think, and I hope that part of the discussion will be about that. But the other part is also, I have heard discussions about the so-called AI moonshot in Europe, which was a pursuit or an attempt to create funding schemes for very promising startups that are born in Europe, so that they don't leave and go to the Silicon Valley instead to look for further funding. And I think this is also a very important part of the discussion. So the financial mechanisms we have here, we have China, publicly sponsoring AI, and we have the US, where you have VC funds, for instance, and private business that is really risking a lot and putting a lot of money on AI. And in Europe, actually, either of these approaches would be something that we should be discussing, because we have none of them. So I don't know what is happening to this AI moonshot discussion. I have participated in some of these discussions a while ago, but then the discussion really died out. So I am hoping that we're going to discuss incentivizing, building, and keeping AI-related projects in Europe.
Do you believe this kind of fretfulness when it comes to AI technology is more on the administrative level, on lawmakers, or is it more of a collective thing when it comes to the population?
I think it's a collective thing, and I am not surprised, because AI, it's the first technology that perhaps does not think, but it certainly reasons to some extent, and it can make inferences. So in some ways, it's comparable to us. And because of that, it can feel very threatening. And it's also threatening that it could possibly get out of hand. So I think this is a public sentiment towards this technology. And also, you see a lot of that in the US. But in the US, what you also have is a capitalist culture where innovation matters, where money matters. So even though most of the scariest movies about artificial intelligence come from the US, over there, the ambient or the climate is to really support this technology because it gives a competitive edge. And in Europe, we're just left with the fears. In China, on the other hand, it's a tool for building growth. That's how it is communicated to the society by the leaders in China, that it's a technology that's going to increase our safety and also boost our competitiveness. And this is the way you should be thinking about it. So in Europe, we have a lot of fear. We have less of this, competitive, perhaps, approach to this technology. And maybe we don't see enough, or we disregard the chances that it brings together with it. For instance, in the healthcare sector and plenty of others. It's really, or potentially can be, a very beneficial technology if we use it right. And I think Europe can find its way also in using it right, and for all the good purposes that also European citizens would support.
Right. I've spoken to an AA professor, and his theory is that perhaps the tale of Prometheus is so ingrained in like Western European culture that perhaps people have this kind of irrational, very primal fear when it comes to very advanced technology that, well, could potentially replace how the society function. But is there any way that perhaps we can advocate for the usefulness and the productive use of AI that can steer the general perception towards perhaps looking at it more favorably?
Well, I've always been thinking about a couple of different areas where I think Europeans would support this technology. And I mentioned healthcare, and I would stand by this because healthcare, I think, is a non-controversial case.
Yeah.
We need better diagnosis. We need faster healthcare that is really focused on the patient. We need personalized medicine. This is something that AI can enable. We also need better services, civic services for the Europeans. You should be able to apply for a passport very quickly. You know, the UX of the platforms that are offered by the public administration should be very easy to use, and generative AI is a very good tool to make them easy to use. You can talk to the platform and then, get stuff done, and also take care of the things that you should be taking care of. I don't know, like taxes or other things. So I think there are at least a couple of different examples of beneficial usage of this technology that can change this perception to some extent. And I think all of us would agree that, of course, there are cases where the use of artificial intelligence is definitely disputable and problematic, like in the military area. However, there are many other areas like logistics, like business, like commerce, like healthcare, where we see many benefits. And we would like European companies to participate in that change and also to innovate with this technology.
Brilliant. The AI is here to do your taxes, not to kill Sarah Connor. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.